Hello, my name is Andre, and this is episode 8 of Chronicles of Reality. And in this episode, I actually decided to speak of something beforehand that I need to cover before I get to what I called save points. So, there are some other levels of hallucinations that were present but weren't as prominent as others, but they did have their role in my experience. So, the one of the first of those would be olfactory senses, olfactory hallucinations. Let's see. Up until this point, my experience with these type of hallucinations stemmed from me being intubated for a number of weeks and waking up with this sort of taste in my mouth and smell, which couldn't be identified and associating with anything else that I was exposed to or was exposed to before my stay in the hospital for that time. For especially the first of 3 times that I was intubated for my lungs collapsing, was a time period where I woke up with no, when I woke up, I found that my senses were sort of off. For the longest time, I smelled what sort of smelled like, man, maybe like burning mints. So burning mint is what it sort of smelled like for the longest time, like a sweet burning mint. And funny enough, I experienced things down the line that that were sort of along those lines when it came to this experience. So all while being accosted by these entities, uh, I I experienced other senses. So eventually, there was this level of of hallucinations where everything is full blown. So the auditory hallucinations, full blown. Tactile hallucinations, full blown. The the and then that came with experience such as things moving along in my mouth. For instance, right now I have in my mouth what are false tongues, a false tongue moving around. Are others, but I can only feel one right now. So as I'm talking, there's something being manipulated within my mouth at once. So there are these sort of wisps at times that act as these tongues that are constantly being cut off metaphysically, almost like my mouth is another metaphysical area where it can be entered with through the mouth, and then you can manipulate almost the entrance of the mouth as well. So what keeps happening is that I keep getting wisps and layers of this tongue of this tongue being sort of pulled and manipulated on the astral space or metaphysical space, and and twisted and maybe crimped to some degree. Sometimes they don't aren't. Sometimes they're just twisted. So it sort of affects how I breathe or how I'm sensing air that comes throughout my body. But along with that, we have the twisting of the throat that makes it worse. And so that makes it so then that may be happening at one time. And for instance, I I experienced something where something attached to my mouth and then injected something into my mouth that I could taste. It almost felt like this sort of I don't know what to really. Almost like honey, kind of like honey, but honey that did not taste like honey, but it had that consistency. I felt that. I felt that in my mouth for the longest time, and that was I mean that would just be like just injected into my mouth out of nowhere, and then that just that just sort of that's sort of one thing among other things that felt sort of violating, to to anybody who might experience it. And this taste, so I had the so I'm tasting whatever it is that's in my mouth, and I can smell whatever it is that's in my mouth, and it both tastes and smelled like burnt Vaseline. That's the only explanation for it. Burnt Vaseline. No, like no for whatever reason, I would taste and smell burnt Vaseline throughout all of these experiences. Now you would have noticed by now that I have not covered one type of hallucination, and that would be visual hallucinations, which I also experienced along with my body. And this is where my reality started to really change and sort of took a turn. Let's see. So, for example, I might be tasting and smelling what I mentioned, burnt Vaseline, for some time period. Then I might go on a walk or on a drive. I I had to eventually stop going on walks for a little while and drives for two different reasons. Uh, one of them, one of them was, and I'm sort of skipping over time just to sort of explain these different things, and eventually I'll cover these other events in further detail. One of these sort of things will be me walking. I don't really go on that many long walks. Well, I used to for a while, and what I found is that I would end up in places that I didn't mean to, and this is sort of how that happened per my experience. So, example, I would go on a walk. Now there is, there's a building that's not too far away from where I am. I wanted to walk around to that building and then come right back. It isn't that far. But one day I found that while I'm walking, there is this feeling of uh, this lagging feeling. I used to play, so if you ever play video games, lagging is sort of a term where you see your character sort of moving, and all of a sudden they either freeze or things start to just shift around them out of nowhere. And to other people, your character just looks like it's drifting, or maybe sometimes it looks like it's stuck. Other times it looks like it's drifting. And in this case, for me, I was drifting, and on some sort of form of autopilot. So I went on a walk one day, and this walk isn't much longer. Uh, Not much longer than a mile. It isn't that far. So I intended to just go walk this mile and then come back for that day, just for a walk, just to clear my head because of what was going on with me. And because at this time I wanted to go on a drive, but I couldn't listen to music because I would just hear voices. I would just hear the voices in the music. So without that, it would just be me just being silent in the car, in the car, in the car. So that is something that I just did not do at the time. That isn't how I function. That's not really how I function now. I mean, I can function actually that way, but when it comes to driving, I like to have something playing. So there's one day I went for a walk that should not have taken me that long, and I should have been home. I should have been home in under 30 minutes. What I found is that I remember walking. Then I remember that everything sort of shifts around me, that sort of lags, just like Need for Speed Underground or the Fast and the Furious, where you see them use nitro or NOS, and everything sort of blurs around them. That's what I experienced. I felt things just sort of blur around me, and then I'm in another place. I'll explain another time period of this, another instance of this later on. But for now, I'll give you this example. We'll just say that the street is I don't know, Smith. So I was going up Smith Street, and suddenly I lag, things blur around me, and then I notice that I'm in an area that don't notice, I don't recognize, which is weird because even if I were to walk another, let's see, 8 miles down that road, it still would have been the same road. So there is something seriously wrong when I found myself in some other place that says the same street name but is not that road. I know this because this road eventually ends in the direction that I'm going. But somehow I ended up lagging and ended up on some other version of the street. But I had never been to this place before. So I then find myself at this point somehow now without a working phone to call anybody or to use GPS to get myself back home. So now I have to find a way home in a place that I don't even know where I am. And so I walked around. I remember walking around for the longest time, trying to find my way, looking for familiar streets or streets that I thought were familiar, but then turned out to be something else. It was yeah, it was something. It was something. So yeah, that's something that sort of happened to me, and it took me all day, all evening and all night to get home. So, and I don't even know how I officially got home because walking. I remember, so I ended up in this area, walked around, and this is where some visual hallucinations come into play. The visual hallucinations that at least some of, at least one of the introductions to these visual hallucinations for myself was me looking at the billboards and looking at graffiti and looking at different signs that are around me and seeing that these things were either these things were shifting form. So, for instance, as I'm walking in what eventually apparently was the right direction, I see I see graffiti in this area. It's like one of these sort of, there's a walkway, and it's one of those areas where there's almost sort of bridge, and you can look down and see that there's what we'll say, sewage drains or aqueducts, and naturally, of course, there's graffiti in these areas. So I see that there's graffiti down there, and I remember looking at the graffiti and watching the graffiti morph and shift form. So, and suddenly is this one thing, and it shifts to another, out of nowhere. So I'm seeing some nice graffiti, and it shifts to some other type of scene, like right before my eyes. Uh, yeah, yeah, right before my eyes, and that was kind of interesting. And I said before that I'm one who, and I was one who, and I still am one who was very intrigued by my experience. Uh, So I'm sort of I wasn't even freaked out by it happening. It was just sort of a okay check, made a note, that's happening now, and then it's like no that's and I kind of wonder what else would change. And I found if I focused on an image to a certain degree, if I felt, especially if I sort of felt something from it, I'd be able to change it. I'd be able to change it. So that billboard I mentioned before, there was a billboard that I changed from one image to another. And when I did so, this image that I changed it to, changed it over the which I don't recall what it was, but it changed to a different image. And then on that image were three white dots. And after looking at that image for a little while, intrigued by these three white dots that are on there, suddenly, as if they were projected into my eyesight, those three dots then appeared in my eye line for the longest time. And if I closed my eyes, I'd be able to see three white dots all in a row. I believe in Morse code, it's an S if I remember right, and that's yeah, three dots in a row. So yeah, and that was interesting. I was like, what am I looking at? What's happening? What is happening? Which sort of triggered another stage that I'll get into, and that we'll call that the cryptic, or we'll call it the cryptic stage. So that was like the beginning of that. I saw that image and I had it in my head, I had it in my eyes, all the way back, just illuminated, just an overlay. Like a HUD or a heads up screen on a video game. It's just there. so so it was just strange. But eventually, I lagged again and ended up back home. So, and I ended up back on the street that I was before, but further down, like way down. So I ended up a little after that end point on that street. So I had to walk those 8 miles, or I say 8 miles, it could be more, but I had to walk those miles back home after walking around for God knows how long. So that needs to be to ending up there. Uh, I'll mention the driving side as well, and then I can sort of end this for right now. I'll just keep this sort of as short as possible. The the driving side of things. I did not want to go on drives as well because I didn't want to just. I didn't have anything to listen to. But eventually, I thought that maybe I should drive. I noticed that I could still get some sort of relaxation from going on a drive, and and that could possibly work. And I've never lagged while driving. At least at this point. what what would happen is that I'd end up on these drives that would just go all over the place. For me, it was almost like I was trying to escape the voices and protect my family at the same time in a twisted manner. Because, I've sort of briefly mentioned before, these voices eventually became quite hostile. There was Kaido, who was really aggressive, who only became more and more aggressive as time passed. Then, and then some of the other voices sort of shifted, from then uh, from him shifting or after Kaido shifting. But that I'll explain in entirely another story. But what I will say before I end this episode is that when I went on drives, given I couldn't listen to music at the time, I then found that I then had this moment of dread. I specifically remember driving, and where I am is it's a decent city like area, and a decent city area and decent town. So there's plenty of buildings, but we do have areas further away that are in the hills and area and everything. So and there's less civilization. So I remember going on these drives to clear my head. And the reason I was so adamant about this was because drives are just so deeply rooted in my, I guess, sort of in my DNA and my history. You know, my father is able to go on drives to clear his head. You know, when we were younger, we used to go on Sunday drives as a family. And at that same time, I used to go on road trips. You know, with my father and my sister, and and my mother as well. Like, we can't leave her out. But we did have a number of them where it was just sort of a bonding experience for just the father and the kids. So so we would go on these drives and these drives or these road trips, and they'd be pretty nice. Uh, so so I would go on these drives, sort of having this in mind and deeply rooted in myself, who took up that practice after, once I got older. So I remember going on these drives and trying to listen to music and hearing the voices, just hearing the voices. Then, then I turned off the radio because I started to hear the voices, and I did not want to fight with Kaido or Terra or anybody at that time. I just wanted to drive and relax and do things, and and maybe part of me and part of me had this sort of uh, rational irrationality of leaving the town or even the state without telling anybody, because I'd be able to get away and not tip off the voices that I'm running away, or that not running away, that I'm trying to get out of the city. But part of me doesn't want to leave because, of course, my family's here, and I want to fight for me staying in town. Like, this is where I live. This is my home. This is my apartment. I have voices trying to tell me to get out of my own apartment, to just leave, to run away. And I have one side of telling me to run. I have another side of voices freaking out every time I left my apartment, saying that I'm running like I'm some sort of criminal. I'm not. I'm nowhere near a criminal. so, so it was just crazy to me to be sort of treated this way, like I did something. So, but I remember this very specific, this very specific moment of dread where I was driving, just trying to get away. I'm way in the hills, and and then suddenly I hear the voices, turn the radio off, and everything's silent. And all I'm able to hear all I'm able to hear for a while is the wind. And then I noticed two things. I noticed that one, the wind that I'm feeling does not feel like regular wind. It feels like a harder, like a semi-solid wind that I've previously mentioned briefly. Excuse me. And then the second thing that I realized was that in the wind, in the open window, the nice open window of my car, where I could feel the breeze, I hear voices trailing in the wind. As if somebody is speaking from a wind tunnel, but you can still make out their voices. And it was then, at that very moment, that I had to almost accept the reality for the time being that I was not going to have peace until I beat this. Until this went away or I beat this. Whatever it was. So yeah, that was quite that was quite the moment of dread that I went through. So, and I remember that drive back. I don't remember where I was. I remember what it looked like, but I do remember the drive back. And from that day, I heard voices everywhere. Yeah, I heard voices everywhere, all the time, 24/7, for 3 years. And that was one of the most haunting experiences that I've had over my years. It was just one of the worst experiences, and also most intriguing experiences of my life. So that that is I guess I'll end it there. That covers the subjects that I've already mentioned. I will go into these details a little bit more in depth in later episodes. But for now, I will end this here. I do want to thank you for all tuning in and watching my channel. Please like and subscribe. Please ask me any questions related to what you've heard in these episodes. I'm going to use these questions on a later video once I get to a certain point. So ask me anything and comment however you need to. I'm open to anything. So thank you again, and until next time.